Happy International Women's Day, everyone. We're here to celebrate by tackling the big issues that women in motorsport face almost daily. Welcome back to the F1 era, brought to you by Nerve Podcasts and Nerve Radio. I'm Eden Hannigan.
I'm Rebecca Coulson.
And I'm Honor Dench.
And we're still in our F1 era.
We are 3 of 7 girls studying sports journalism at Bournemouth University, and we think it's incredibly important that women get to talk about the sports they love so freely, which is why we've set up this podcast. This weekend we'll see the first ever F1 Academy race broadcasted on TV live. It will be the season opener for their 2024 calendar. This is a huge step for women in the sport. However, with allegations being made against Red Bull's team principal and the reaction this has caused on social media, it's evident we have such a long way to go.
In light of it being International Women's Day, it would be extremely wrong to ignore everything that's happened in regard to Red Bull and Christian Horner over the past few days and weeks. And it also, as being an all-women podcast, an all-women's motorsport podcast, the fact that Christian Horner is still in the sport, it sets a very uncomfortable precedent for women being listened to and believed when they come out about these allegations. They should be taken extremely seriously, and it obviously we don't know what happens behind closed doors. We don't know what happened in the briefing or anything, and people have said that this isn't over, it's still being investigated in certain ways, but at the same time it just seems like it's all trying to be brushed under the carpet as quickly as possible. When you see those photos that emerged of Christian Horner and with his wife, it all seemed a little bit staged and it all seemed a bit PR-y, and it just seems strange being a woman in sport. Nobody high up seems to be given this the attention it deserves. And what really struck me, what I found out the other day, the FIA president Mohammed Ben Sulayem allegedly requested Max Verstappen to publicly back Christian Horner. Verstappen refused, and it just seems entirely strange why the FIA president would ask a driver to back up somebody with these serious allegations being made against them. It seems awful, not only in light of the allegations, but also awful on a PR standpoint for Max Verstappen to publicly back him. And his father, Jos Verstappen, has publicly spoken out against Christian Horner. BBC Sport quoted him as saying, "The situation is not good for the team and is driving people apart." And he also mentioned that the team would explode if Christian Horner remained as team principal. And then an RB spokesperson replied, sort of, by saying, "There are no issues here. The team are united and we are focused on driving, focused on racing." And it just seems a little weird how everybody's just brushing this under the carpet. It needs to be discussed more.
Well, it's important that we address the fact that they are all allegations, and
Yes.
you know, we're not here to say that he did do it or he didn't do it. However, we are all people that follow the sport, and we all have social media accounts that we may have commented on what's going on. And I don't know about you two, but I've seen a lot of my peers on Twitter that have tweeted something about the allegations, who are all women, and their comments are filled with some people agreeing and the rest using this as an excuse to be misogynistic and to push them away from the sport. They're being told to get back into the kitchen, they're being told to shut up and go and cook because you don't know what you're talking about. And I just find it really pathetic, really, that just because a woman speaks up on something that's happening in the sport, you know, all the press are talking about it. If the men talk about it, it's fine, but if the woman speaks up, they are being pushed out. They aren't allowed an opinion on social media without being told that they should just go back to the kitchen. It's an excuse for people to be misogynistic. And don't get me wrong, this is not all the fans. This is a small group of people who use anything like this, including the Susie Wolff investigation, to push female fans away from the sport because they don't like them in it. You can tweet in support of Horner without being misogynistic. That's a very key point to make. And it's a real shame that just because you want to speak on something, you're being attacked, and that all the attacks you're being and the remarks being made towards you are purely based on your gender and not on the fact that you're a fan of the sport.
Absolutely. This is something I've experienced before in the football sphere with the allegations that came out about Mason Greenwood last year. And it's really, really frustrating because you can never have a constructive conversation about it with somebody, because we're all very strong in our beliefs, I think. I think we're all under the impression that this is not good for the sport. This is not a good impression to have as women who want to work in the sport, and this is just not a good thing to be having around Formula One. And they've done all of these initiatives in the past, Re-Racers One and things like this, all of the things that they've set up before. Ferrari do the Girls on Track, where they get a group of like 6 female karters and they try and get them into the Ferrari Driver Academy. great movement, but you've got to think about how much of this is just PR, because when things like this go on behind the scenes, and I don't want to say it's rampant, but it's probably the most high profile case we've had in Formula One. It's probably not the only case that's happened in Formula One, but it's dark, and it's really, really upsetting that we can't have a constructive conversation, because we'll sit there and we'll say our piece and we'll talk and we'll shout our opinions, and yet at the end of the day we will never get heard, because some people are just too stuck in the belief that it's all a set-up, it's not true, it's all lies, and in reality it's all just rooted in misogyny, and it's not right, because there is the evidence there. We've all seen the Google file that got leaked this weekend. Again, we are not 100% of the authenticity of this document. However, by the rumblings around the media, it does seem to be that this is fairly legitimate. Again, completely alleged. It's quite damning, and the fact that he's allowed to still be around the paddock, the fact that he's allowed to sit on the pit wall with Hannah Schmitz, who is a woman, who is probably the most high profile woman in Formula One at the moment, the fact that he's allowed to stand on under the podium with his wife, kind of parading her around like a trophy to show that he's a family man, the fact that he's allowed to basically stay in the job because, by the sounds of it, he has control over who gets jobs and who can get sacked and stuff, because there was a rumour that he basically said no to getting sacked, which is crazy. It's crazy that this is happening, and I guess it's just sad more than anything, because you just imagine, like, you wait your whole life to be working in Formula One, you know, you want to be a woman in that paddock, and you know that there are so many challenges, and then you get your dream job, you're working at the best team on the grid, if you will, and then that happens to you, and you either have the choice to walk away from the job that you've worked so hard to get, or you have to put up with this harassment, and it's not okay, and it never will be okay.
Well, that's so important to say, because, I mean, the three of us here, we are all wanting to work in sports, and we all love Formula One. Being in the paddock would be a dream job for all three of us, and it's such a shame to read about the experiences that women who have made it are currently facing. And to sort of look at it from the person who's made the allegations, the hatred she has received from speaking out and from sending these messages, the alleged messages, you know, we don't know, it's not all been confirmed yet, but the bravery it took to speak out is incredible, and to instantly be hit with the overwhelming amount of hate that she has received. We don't even know her name, and they're still finding a way to hate on her. People are calling out saying she should be named and shamed because he's been dismissed and he's been cleared, so that we should basically hang her out to dry and she should be named and shamed. I don't think people understand the amount of hatred she'd receive if we did do that. And like you say about Hannah Schmitz, imagine being a woman in Red Bull right now. Every time it cuts to a woman in Red Bull on TV, people tweet saying, I wonder if it was her that's made the allegations. If people find out about a woman that works for Red Bull, people are tweeting saying, I wonder if it's her that's made the allegations. There's nowhere to hide, really. All the women in that team probably don't feel that safe, but they're also all being attacked because there's no confirmation as to who said who stepped up and who sent out the text messages.
Yeah, I think it's also worth saying as well that people don't realise that just because the case was dismissed doesn't mean that he's innocent. It just means that they didn't find enough to say that you are, because obviously it's got to be on the balance of probability. And I mean, from the leaks that we've seen, I don't know how you could find that innocent, or I don't want to say find it innocent, but you could clear it. But people seem to forget that just because the case is dismissed, it doesn't mean that he's innocent, because by the looks of it, he's not. It just means on the balance of probabilities, they couldn't find enough to say, oh, it's definitely him, he's definitely guilty of what exactly she's alleging, and people are too quick to jump the gun on that, I say. And also as well, I hate the fact that it's been put down to people not liking Christian Horner and wanted him to leave the sport, because that's not what it's about. It's about the decency of knowing that there is somebody who has brought a lot of upset to a woman in a paddock in a place where they're already marginalised and they're already disrespected enough. And the fact that somebody so high profile can get away with it and still be parading around TV like this, and still be, I guess, because we spoke about the Bahrain Grand Prix, it wasn't the most interesting race. He was probably the most spoken about person in the paddock this weekend. That's not okay. It's not okay, and the fact that people are passing it off like it is, it just doesn't sit right with me.
I also just want to point out, when you mentioned it, Honor, when people were criticising whoever this woman is who's made the allegations, they've been coming for her on social media and, you know, tweeting and posting horrible things about her. But at the same time, if these allegations were to come out in 10 or 15 years and she would turn around and say, oh, Christian Horner said this to me or did this to me while I was working there, people would say, why didn't you tell people sooner? Why didn't you come out about it and tell people sooner? But then when she does, she gets treated in this way, and then people wonder why women don't want to speak out about these things, because they're so scared.
That it was always going to be the reaction, no matter what time she came out, that it was the wrong time to say it.
Definitely.
People are
100%.
angry that she said it now because they're thinking she's trying to attack his job, and people would be angry in the future because she'd be trying to attack his reputation.
100%. I also think it's worth saying as well, like you mentioned about Jos Verstappen saying that Red Bull is gonna like fall apart because of these things. He may well be right, but a broken clock is right twice a day, you know.
Oh.
I think also as well, just to say, in the last hour they have said that Jos Verstappen will not be attending the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix this weekend because of the comments he made about Christian Horner and the fact that they had a fight, apparently a verbal fight, in the paddock this weekend, a verbal disagreement over, I suppose, the comments. And like, I don't want to say anything, but it does seem very interesting that these rumours first came out in the Dutch press. But I'm going to leave that line of thinking there. It's curious that people are suddenly trying to praise Jos Verstappen for saying like the basic thing, when Jos Verstappen got charged with using his car as a weapon against his ex-wife. Max Verstappen's mother had a restraining order against Jos Verstappen. He is not the shining light that women need in motorsport. In fact, he's far from it. So yeah, great that Jos Verstappen is speaking up against Christian Horner, but it's in his best interest rather than it being for women.
I agree with that, and I think it's the fact that he's speaking up and we're listening to it is somewhat ironic based on his stance and his past. However, I do think maybe it's him using his position for good, because as you've seen, when the women speak up about it, it gets nowhere and it's all rubbish and we don't even care and we just dismiss the investigation. So perhaps, as much as he isn't the greatest person, him speaking up about it is maybe actually going to help the investigation. Not to like praise him, but to sort of respect the fact that he and the comments he's made to the media are stirring up the investigation again and could actually make Horner leave. And it's sad because it would be Horner leaving because of the threat of Max leaving Red Bull and not because of his behaviour. But if it gets him gone, it gets him gone.
It's interesting as well you say that about potentially Max leaving Red Bull, because the rumour at the moment, it's really, really heating up, is that Max Verstappen might be leaving to go to Mercedes. I don't see that happening, but if these things are happening with his dad behind the scenes, if Christian Horner stays on, then they are at risk of losing Max Verstappen. And I don't want to like make this whole thing about Max, because it's not, but at the same time, it would not be a good look for Red Bull, who are already in it PR-wise, if you then go and lose your 3-time world champion, almost 4-time world champion potentially this season, and he goes off to a relatively struggling Mercedes team because you didn't do the right thing. And the fact that some people from Red Bull have said that they thought he was going to leave in the last couple of days, they've said that they thought that the evidence was enough that he would leave. It says everything you need. Yeah,
so it's because Jos Verstappen was seen talking to Toto Wolff, and obviously the fact that you've now come out and said that he had a fight with Christian Horner, it's very interesting that he then went and spoke to Toto Wolff, and he did say to the press that his son would be leaving Red Bull if Horner stays. So I think Horner should go either way if these messages are out. I know it's all allegations, and if he's completely proved innocent, then there should be transparency. We should be shown why he's been proved innocent, because at the moment we've been told the case is dismissed and then someone sent all this supposed evidence to the press and it's been leaked to fans and journalists alike. It's very hard for it to go away now, and I think Jos Verstappen is right. The team will explode if he's still there. And I think he's doing it to protect his son, because he wants his son to win without a tainted victory, which is understandable. But Max Verstappen is not going to win a championship this year if Christian Horner stays, because everyone will remember it as the year that's tainted by the allegations. No one will sit and think about Max's actual hard work and what he's done to race.
100%. I also think as well it's worth saying that it says a lot to me that the FIA's approach to it is that basically somebody or like another team would have to complain about Christian Horner and about the evidence.
Which they have, though. Toto Wolff and Zach Brown have both said the investigation needs to be either way more transparent or redone.
Yeah, but the FIAs themselves can't investigate it until a team actually appeals to them about Christian Horner.
Okay, I see.
So, and the fact that Ben Suleiman and Christian Horner were seen hugging in the pit lane at the weekend. I know Mohammed Ben Sulayem doesn't have a particularly good track record of comments about women in motorsport. So to see that, it's really, really disheartening, and it just kind of shows at the moment the state that Formula One is when it comes to treating its women within the pit lane.
It's just really sad that obviously this investigation is continuing and he's still going to be present this weekend, but it's going to take the fact, so not only are Formula One in Saudi Arabia, so is the F1 Academy.
Yep.
And this is this huge step for women. It's their chance to get into Formula One. I mean, I've some concerns with it. You can only actually compete in 2 seasons and you can only get 10 super license points for winning a season. So the max you could leave with is 20 super license points, but you need 40 to compete in Formula One. So I do think it's not quite fully developed yet. It's second season, the first one that's going to be broadcasted live. So I think there's a little bit of work that needs to be done, but I do agree that it's a huge step for women. And they're going racing in Saudi Arabia, but it's sad to think that perhaps this is all going to be tainted by the fact that everyone's focused on the Christian Horner allegations about his inappropriate behaviour to a woman in a workplace. They're trying to claim that women have a place in Formula One by showing them the F1 Academy will be racing there this weekend, but it's not actually safe for women to work there.
Also in Saudi Arabia, which doesn't have the best track record on women's rights as well, should we say, the fact that they are racing there should be celebrated massively.
And historic, really.
Exactly. But I fear that it may get left behind because of this news, and I really, really hope that that isn't the case, because it deserves to be celebrated.
It really does, and it's especially with it being International Women's Day this week, the behaviour can't slide anymore. They need to have full transparency. Then, if he's completely innocent, and the case has been dismissed, release the evidence and show us why he's been dismissed. And don't forget, when Sky Sports asked him if the messages were true, he just said he denied to comment. He didn't deny the messages.
I did notice that a little bit, yeah, because I do feel like maybe he only said that because they were active, or they are sort of active proceedings, and you don't really want to, I mean, this is my media law coming in, you don't really want to mess with active proceedings. But it does seem a little bit like you refuse to comment because you kind of know you're on a back foot here. But then he might be thinking that no matter what he says, the media are going to spin it whatever way they want. That's
true, although if you were Christian Horner, you'd want your reputation to be clean, and if you didn't do it, you'd denying the allegations and the claims publicly, and even after the messages have come out, you'd be denying them. And also there wouldn't be a rumour that you've paid £600,000 to the claimant.
That's a dodgy one, yeah.
It's not good reading. It's really, really not.
I do want to touch on a little bit outside of Formula One. Eden, you mentioned you faced some discrimination in football, and I've been quite, I guess, lucky that I've been widely accepted. Where I go to watch football at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and every time I go, I do get treated like an equal. People don't look at me differently. But when I take it to social media and I start talking about football on social media, it's then when I get the comments and I get the DMs. Some of them are so low-key, you hardly notice it. They're like, oh, what do you know about this? What do you know about football? Okay, who won the FA Cup in 1968? And I'm just like, I don't know, and I don't actually care. And I'm just like, I'm very thankful that my dad has always encouraged me to support football. His friends have always encouraged it as well. They got us football tickets for us to watch football at White Hart Lane. So I've always been very accepted in this environment, and I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, every time I try and speak on social media, I get these comments where I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about, you don't know anything, and it's just really, really frustrating that people feel like behind the mask of social media they can say these kinds of things.
Well, I think every female Formula 1 fan can relate to this. They have either been told, they'll say they're a fan of Formula 1, okay, name every 20 drivers. Name who won the Brazilian Grand Prix in this year.
It's the worst.
Do you watch it because you fancy Charles Leclerc?
Oh,
who's the prettiest driver then? You can't like Formula 1 as a woman without having ever heard one of those comments be thrown back at you.
It's like, as well, and I don't want to say this in like a disrespectful way, but it's like, for example, Lizzie McIntosh, love her. Great influence on Formula 1 TikTok. She is now dating the IndyCar driver Michael Armstrong, who was in Formula 2, formerly in the Ferrari Driver Academy. He has the podcast, and I still remember, so one of his friends is a F2 driver, and this F2 driver who presents the show with him asked Lizzie McIntosh who the hottest F1 driver is. And Lizzie went straight back at him and said, is this something you ask all your guests? In a way, they do kind of have that kind of banter, but it's never been said as explicitly before as it was to her. So it's an interesting one, that this is the kind of mindset that even the younger drivers in the support paddocks have. And I wonder if that is because they are increasingly on social media, if because, we know drivers, they don't really go to school, they don't graduate, they go and they risk it all for this career that may or may not work out in the long run. They go for it, and then I think because of that they have a lack of interaction with women, shall we say, until they make it, and also a lack of, I guess, social skills, really, because you don't ask somebody that who works in Formula 1. Like, if she answered and went, oh yeah, I think it's Lewis Hamilton, then that reflects really badly on her the next time she maybe has to see Lewis.
She'll never be taken seriously again. It's so unfair to be a woman in the sport, and a woman trying to break through in sport, because even as young sports journalists who are trying to get our way there, people will question whether we're only doing this because we just want to meet a driver and fall in love and marry them. No, I actually just really want to work for the social media teams in Formula 1.
I mean, if Charles Leclerc asked, I wouldn't say no. But, yeah, I also have to preface this by saying I get this a lot because I do support Charles Leclerc. People are like, oh, of course, whenever I say it, when they ask me who you support, it's always, of course you do. And I'm like, well, actually, yeah, of course I do, because I watched this guy start his racing career in Formula 2. I watched him basically finish a race in Silverstone in 2017 where he had oil spilling out of his car. One of his mirrors went flying off the car, and I thought, yeah, this guy's talented. This guy can compete with Max Verstappen if this is what he's doing in Formula 2. So, of course I support Charles Leclerc because he is a damn good driver. I watched the racing for the racing.
I mean, you can't even see their faces when they're
exactly
driving.
And again, going back to, not that I want to speak about this man any more than we already do, but Christian Horner would say when Drive to Survive went out, oh, it's done really good with like getting women into Formula 1 because like of all of these 20 like attractive men. And it's like, well, we can't see their faces for the majority of the race. We only see them if they crash out and then they're walking back through the paddock with the helmet on or something. With the helmet off.
The only face we do see is his, which isn't that great.
Exactly. It's frustrating because, again, you just hear these comments so many times. It's like, if you're going to say something like that, maybe be a bit more original with your delivery.
It's a bit boring after all, hearing the same thing over and over again.
Exactly. And I think the worst thing is, it's like, for example, I'll defend Charles Leclerc on Twitter. He always gets, I personally think, badly framed by the media. There has been discourse recently on social media that this is because his fan base is majority female, which I've never thought of it that way, but it's an interesting take. Don't know how much legitimacy there is in that, but it is definitely an interesting thing to think about for sure. But it's like, for example, I'll go and I'll talk with somebody and have a discussion about it, and on my personal account I don't have myself as a profile picture, so somebody might like check my bio midway through a conversation and then they'll see that I have my she her pronouns in there, and then they're like, oh, I don't want to argue with you anymore because you're a woman. Great, thanks. I didn't want to argue with you anyway, but I mean, glad you've ended the conversation on that note, letting me know that exact reason why I didn't want to argue with you. So it's just frustrating. Social media is a completely different world, and unfortunately I don't think we're ever going to be free from it, but it would be nice if people could do something.
Well, just touching on the fact that you said what happens when you say you're a Charles Leclerc fan. It's very similar to if you were to say you're a Lewis Hamilton fan before 2021 in his dominant years. He was obviously the most well-known Formula One driver at the time. I'd say he still is. He's got the most championships, so it's very easy for you to recognise that name. You don't have to watch the sport to know Lewis's name. So if you were to tell someone, oh, your favourite driver is Lewis Hamilton, oh, you don't really watch it, it's just, you just know that name. Well, no, actually, Lewis is like the only driver that advocates week in, week out for women to join the sport. Like, he's the reason I'm wanting to work in sport, because he's the one that's made me feel that it's actually accessible to me as a woman. And it's such a shame that just because you'll tell people you're a fan of him, it's, oh, because that's just because it's the only name you know. No, it's because it's not only is he an incredible driver, and I've watched him since I was 4, he's the only one like advocating for women to join the sport weekly.
It's frustrating. I can relate to that a little bit, again, sort of through football. But when I was in school and I'd try and get in the boys' convos about football, I'd always sort of be like, oh, I watched that game as well, let's talk about it. And I often got asked, oh, you're a Tottenham fan, who's your favourite player? And I'd always say my favourite player is either Son or Kane, and they'd always be like, oh, you're just saying like the 2 most well-known players in the team. And I'm like, well, no, because they're the 2 best players in the team. Am I meant to name someone really obscure from the academy, like...
Well, that's what they want you to do. If you join in a conversation, and I had it in school as well, if you were to join in a conversation... they would be like, okay, well, you need to answer all these 5 questions before you can start talking to us.
No, my one was always really weird, because it's like, I knew how many people like were football fans in my secondary school. Like, the majority of the boys were, and now like I know that some of the girls are, because I see them on social media. One of my friends from school was lucky enough that they got to go to the Carabao Cup final a couple of weeks ago. Wow. I don't know how they managed it, but I'm extremely jealous. But I always found it strange, because I would always speak about football, and yet nobody was willing to have a conversation with me. And I don't know if that's because I was overly passionate, or whether that's because they might have been a bit scared that I knew a bit more than they did. Especially because, like, I'm a Middlesbrough fan, my team are in the Championship, I've supported this team all my life, and I can say that I support them, and then some people go to me, what's a Middlesbrough? Yeah. I'm lucky enough that I support, I guess, a fairly, I don't want to say niche team, because like they're not, we've got a 35,000 seat stadium, but it's always interesting, because it's like I could never have these discussions.
Definitely not. What really frustrated me was when I was in school, I used to play sports, I used to play cricket, and it was a mixed team, and I was one of 2 girls who played. I joined with my friend, and she dropped out. I was then the only girl in the cricket team, and all the guys would kind of look at me like, not in a judgmental way, but in a sort of
pitiful way.
Yeah, like, why are you here? Wait. And I would say, like, it was fun playing with the guys. In many ways I thought I was better than half of them, but it wasn't anything they said explicitly. It was just the way they looked at me with so much pity, and it was just, I don't know, I feel like just female engagement in sport needs to be encouraged more.
I do think it's interesting though, because it's like when you look into like statistically, women are way more likely to engage in like out of sports stuff if they follow sports. Like, for example, we're Formula One fans. We've started our own podcast because of our engagement with the sport. I know women are more likely to listen to Formula One based podcasts, and it's exactly the same outside of that. Probably the same for a large part on like YouTube and things like that too. So it's always interesting to me when it's like, oh, female engagement isn't as much, or like the female engagement isn't there. It's like, no, because you're not seeking the female engagement. Because of course, like, we want to listen to different things. Of course we like to discuss things about our favourite sports, and of course we like to encourage people to watch our favourite sports, but the engagement can only be there if you like work hard for it, because we want to be engaged in the sport, we want to follow the sport, we want to have these discussions, but we need a safe and healthy environment to do so, and we need to feel like the people that we're listening to or watching or reading also have like the same morals that we do, and they want their audience to be engaged, and they want their female fans to be there.
I do think we're like a really important cog in turning Formula One around and making it so that women are as accepted in the sport as the men are. I think if this Christian Horner allegations had came out 10, 20 years ago, the reaction would have been, once he was dismissed, never spoken of again. I think the fact that we're living in this age of social media and that women do have a voice, and the fact that there is the F1 Academy and we are being more welcomed into the sport means that this allegation isn't going to go away until there's full transparency into the case and he is fully cleared and dismissed and proved why he's dismissed. I think us having things like a podcast, I think all these girls having social media accounts that support Formula One publicly and going to the races, and people like Susie Wolf advocating for us all, even people like Lewis Hamilton, who is a man but week in, week out talks about women getting into the sport. We're definitely part of the change and we're definitely going to make Formula One a better place for women, and this is probably the starting steps of that movement.
100%.
Thank you so much for listening to this very special episode of the F1 era. We will be back next Wednesday to debrief what is going to happen in Saudi Arabia. As always, you can find us on social media under the F1 era on TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, X and Instagram.
And if you'd like to contact us, you can do so on X under Nerve Radio. And we finally have our own email. If you'd like to reach us over that, you can contact us at the F1era@outlook.com.
Thank you so much for listening, and to all the girls out there, keep enjoying the sport, keep tuning in. We will one day be just as well respected as all the men are. Have a lovely weekend.